818th contact. Sunday, August 21st, 2022, 9:04 HRS. Billy. There you are. Welcome and greetings. Eva has already asked me why the light is on in my office, whether I might have been in the office working at night, as happens now and then when I cannot sleep. But I was able to answer her question in the negative, and I also told her that you must have been in my office during the night. When I then looked, I found that apparently my computer had also been used and also my chair, because it was not in the place where I always put it when I leave the office. Florina. You thought correctly, because I was actually in your workroom at night, using your computer. Billy. That is okay, because there is nothing wrong with that. It was just a question because Eva asked about the light and thought that I had worked through the night again and forgotten to turn off the light and so on. But that was not the case. Florina. Of course not, because I did not turn it off. Billy. Which is nothing more to talk about, but what should be mentioned to the contrary is that I have seen on TV how environmental freaks are demonstrating on the streets again and paralyzing the traffic. As a rule, it is younger demonstrators of both sexes who demonstrate quite vehemently against environmental pollution, but not against the actual origin that leads to the environment being polluted and destroyed, moreover, that has conjured up and effectively caused climate change. All the demonstrators of both sexes are mainly ranting against car traffic and the like, and thus against CO2, but not against the actual source of the whole disaster. So not a word is said or shouted about the fact that overpopulation is basically to blame for everything, that the unstoppable and unconscionable procreation and birth of offspring is to blame for the fact that environmental pollution is increasing more and more with every new human being born and populating the earth. All the howling and harm-causing protesters of both sexes do not give a thought to the fact that they of all people are and will be in the future the culprits of the pollution that is taking place. This is inevitable because they are and will be the ones who have, beget and give birth to offspring and will do so in the future. The offspring, however, immeasurably increase the overpopulation, because of which the evil of environmental pollution continues to increase and slowly but surely destroys the whole of nature and its fauna and flora. This is in addition to the fact that the human beings of overpopulation and their emerging desires, necessities of life as well as the urge for luxury give rise to tremendous machinations that lead to the planet Earth being exploited and increasingly hollowed out by companies and corporations and robbed of all its otherwise already rapidly dwindling resources. But all this does not touch the earthling of either sex, because it is very rarely thought of, especially that the more offspring are brought into the world, the more blatant and unstoppable the environmental pollution becomes. The conclusion of the whole endless generation of offspring is that not only overpopulation is growing very blatantly, but also that environmental pollution is increasing to such an extent that the whole of nature, the fauna and flora, is perishing ever faster and ultimately wiping out life on a large scale and irrevocably. But all the demonstration freaks who go out into the streets screaming for environmental protection instead of using their brains and considering everything that should be considered in principle are not thinking about this. First and foremost, it should be thoroughly considered that the number of human beings is to be limited, namely by a worldwide and perennial birth stop, which would finally put an end to the endless overpopulation. This alone, unless a great epidemic decimates or even exterminates humanity, can stop the endless multiplication of Earth humans and the environmental pollution that depends on it, which is becoming ever greater and more unstoppable. The more women give birth to offspring, as a rule, inevitably young women and, of all people, environmental demonstrators who are incapable of thinking and seeing the truth, the more overpopulation grows and thus, in turn, very blatantly, environmental pollution. This also results in much more CO2 emissions, which are not only caused by various vehicle exhaust gases, but in large measure by the huge mass of human beings themselves, who produce CO2 through their breathing, which significantly destroys the environment. However, this is not thought of due to ignorance, and it also does not want to be thought of, because the conscience would rebel, because descendants would have to be renounced. Only the stupid, i.e. the non-thinking, protest against environmental pollution, but not against the true evil, namely against overpopulation and the generation of offspring that precedes it, through which, before the offspring are born, much is already done to pollute the environment. Basically, this is done by their parents, who do this and that for the sake of the expected offspring, whereby a lot is done that already promotes environmental pollution at the time when the offspring is born in the womb. This is because the expectant mother and father are the source of all evils and thus of environmental pollution, because they are also the ones who, among many others, carelessly pollute the environment with waste and rubbish. The authorities and those in power also do nothing against this, because they are sick in the same hospital as those who are demonstratively active in environmental protection and do more harm than good. It's just that the authorities and rulers react differently and in the opposite way than the demonstrators. Florina. How right you are. In general, the leaders and their helpers and the authorities of this world do not do what is necessary and correct. The majority of these Earth humans work on Earth against the people, because they only think of their might and therefore do the wrong thing against the people. What really happens in the people and among the individual Earth humans in the negative, unjust, and in need and misery does not concern and touch the leaders of the state, because they only pay attention to their own well-being, their security and remuneration, and they act out their false as well as fictitious sympathy, and artificial compassion, pity and also feign fictitious sorrow, but in reality they do not care about all evil. Besides, I also want to say this, because here on Earth it cannot be understood by our humanity and consequently cannot be comprehended that in your homeland, Switzerland, elements can and are allowed to hold the leadership of the state who do everything to endanger the state and its neutral security. By this I mean that our peoples, who are of course openly informed about our activities on the Earth planet and who are also allowed to make their views known publicly, argue that it is outrageous to tolerate and allow to remain in the leadership of the state such elements of unreasonableness and of endangering the security of the state, who act contrary to everything that guarantees the peace of the state. Not one voice of our peoples of Era is raised to judge the action of violating neutrality as good, but on the contrary this action is unanimously judged as destroying peace and security. In addition, the question also comes to the fore as to why the people of Switzerland tolerate such useless elements as leaders of the state, who endanger peace, the people and the state, and do not immediately depose them and remove them from office for life. The neutrality of the peoples of the Plejaren has represented various state leaders of the Federation for more than 52,000 years and preserves their security and the peace of the state, and our humanity cannot comprehend that here on Earth, and especially in Switzerland, useless state leaders and other powerful elements that destroy neutrality and thus the peace and security of the state are tolerated. In addition, all the foundations of life of earthly humanity, nature, its fauna and flora, as well as all the ecosystems of the planet and the planet itself are also being destroyed by the exploitation of its resources in such a way that any reparation is already close to the brink of impossibility. The emergence of worldwide overpopulation and thus of the Earth humans' irresponsible excessive procreation and birth of offspring, permitted and uncontrolled by the state, has had the effect that thousands of genera and species of wildlife forms have already been wiped out without salvation and, in addition, has caused environmental pollution so that everything and anything of the naturally viable is rapidly and ever more rapidly approaching total and irrevocable destruction. Because of the fact that the existing and growing Earth human overpopulation can continue to run rampant, the environmental pollution is also becoming ever greater and more precarious, whereby Earth humans themselves, through their greed and irrationality of procreation, are truly the culprits of all evil on Earth with regard to all misery, hardship and environmental pollution. It is also to be said that indeed no human being is better than another in advocating the military and military defense. And every human being is no more than a murderer who deliberately kills another human being, which is also true when acts of war are carried out. State defense in which human beings are killed, as by revolution or war, etc., is not fit for life and corresponds to every possible way of illogic, lack of understanding and unreason. This is why the majority of Earth humans are not concerned, because their profession is non-thinking and thus stupidity, as you correctly put it. If the thinking of Earth humans is defined, then the result is boundless stupidity, that is, illogical, incomprehensible and unreasonable non-thinking, which produces nothing but evil. Earth humans here below are guided by thoughtless personal ideas and desires, not by what is necessary and serves the human beings of the nations for peace, love, true progress and real humanity. It is truly no progress when the death penalty is permitted by law, rest when killing is permitted by law, just as killing by war etc. is against all right of life, which must therefore also be understood to mean killing privately, which also corresponds to murder in every case and under all circumstances. Billy. All that you bring up for discussion is clear to me, certainly also to other Earthlings who really know how to think and do so, even if they are few. But that does not have the effect of making things better, because there are too many people who are not capable of thinking, but are stupid and therefore non-thinkers. They are lulled into a delusional religious belief in a non-existent God, do not allow themselves to be taught and do not realize that they alone are responsible for everything and should think, decide and act themselves, without the delusion of an imaginary God and God creator. That is why they also do not think about the fact that they live on a planet that will one day change the actions of the Earthlings with evil Gewalt. 1. E.g. when a volcano or a caldera erupts, as it will in the future, e.g. with the Lacher Sea, but also with the dormant volcano in Switzerland, of which the geologists etc. have no knowledge. It is already the case that in certain places in the world's oceans, phytoplankton is overflowing and attracting manta rays en masse. And that this is an omen that the planet and nature will take revenge for all that the Earthling is destroying, that does not occur to anyone. Florina. Unfortunately, the future will prove that, and there also the many unnecessary offices and organizations, etc., are of no use, as well as the ideas and wishes of the really incompetent state leaders of Earth, who indulge in their might and set themselves above the peoples who do not dare to resist and depose the incompetence of the state leaders, as we see again and again. But now I must go again, for I came here only because you called, and, moreover, I am to tell you that Ta will come and see you this week. It may be Thursday or Friday, in which case Bermunda and all the others will also return. But before I go, I have the following to ask you. In the records of Svath it is written that together you have also visited various other planets in the solar system. Billy. Yes, we have, and I have also seen many things that no Earthling has been able to see, such as that planets other than Earth also have polar lights. Even the giant planet Jupiter was no exception, nor was Saturn, and also others. The pole lights and the atmospheres of the SOL planets will bring some more surprises for Earthling scientists that they cannot yet imagine. Florina. Yes, that will be so, but now it is time for me to